All right, we are live. All right, so today, so I guess one of the most common questions I get is what technologies, what libraries, what frameworks, what languages should I learn? So that's what I'm going to be. Well, essentially today I'm going to show you how to figure that out. So a lot of times I mention look at your local job postings, plot it all on a spreadsheet, tally it up. But I want to actually go through the process because sometimes I think even it feel like sometimes when I say it feels like a simple process, but I just want to show how easy this process actually is so you can figure this out on your own. The whole idea is to make you more resourceful in figuring out like how to solidify your path. So this is kind of step one, figuring out what technologies you probably should learn, and that might change over time. But yeah, I'm going to share that process. Hopefully it's helpful. Hey, Rico. Hey, Anthony. Hey, Chris. How you guys doing? I am feeling synthwave. 100% synthwave. Let's go ahead and load that up. Let's go. I don't think I've listened to this one before. Oh, I can't even hear it. I wonder why sometimes my headset connects and sometimes it doesn't. There we go. All right, I can hear it loud and clear. That's beautiful music. Synthwave for the win. That's right, Technium. Finally made it to the stream. I always watch your streams afterwards. Oh, that's awesome, Anthony. Glad you can make it this time. All right, so I guess we'll jump into it. And if you have any questions off topic, we'll probably feel free to ask them. Like if you just have general web development questions, we can do like an open Q&A afterwards. Because I feel like this probably shouldn't take more than a half an hour. Maybe. So it'll be pretty short. But yeah, let's jump into it. So this is kind of assuming you decided that you want to go down the web development path. If you're still trying to figure that out, if you want to go web development, if you want to go mobile development, etc., what I would do is I would just look up YouTube videos. I would look up day in the life YouTube videos. And I just made a post about this. This part is really important. If the day in the life YouTube video contains like 50% drone footage without any background talking whatsoever, it's just drone footage, it's just filler, etc., that is not a realistic day in the life video. That video is aimed at getting tons of views. Find a video under 1,000 subscribers, under 2,000, whatever, just a low subscriber amount where the person is essentially like when you are first trying to start on YouTube, you kind of just talk. You just share the knowledge that you think would be helpful towards people. It's not really focused on the algorithm too much. It's just getting it out there. And that's generally what I see from a lot of smaller YouTubers. I went through that phase as well, where you're not even paying attention to anything regarding YouTube. So get a feel, like watch videos, get a feel for the day in the life of these different types of positions and just listen to people talk about it. You can even listen to a few people talk about the path that they had to take to get there as well, right? But use that with a grain of salt. Essentially, you're just trying to get a feel for what you think you might want to do. And that can also change and solidify down the road, but you just want to get a general idea. But we're going to assume web development, you definitely want to focus on that. Maybe you don't even know front end or back end yet. That's completely fine. But this is where we're at. Hey, hologram, how's it going? Drone footage is always very, very realistic day in the life, always, every single time. All right, let's jump into it. So, really simple questions, and I think people struggle. I think a lot of people struggle to even, I don't know. It's hard for me to know. Sometimes it is just pure laziness where people will come into different Discord channels and even hop on live streams and they'll just ask really simple questions. You can Google it. That happens a lot. A lot of people have a really, really bad habit of that. It's going to bite them in the butt always. If you are one of those people, I promise you, you're not only annoying the community that you're asking, but you are building a extremely bad habit that will create dependency, not independence, not resourcefulness. You have to break that habit as soon as possible. You have to Google. You have to Google. And you have to Google again until you find your answer. Spend time on Google. Please, for the love of God, build this skill up as early as possible. It will serve you in the long run. But I get, now there are some people that they just don't know what to look up specifically. And sometimes they just need a little nudge, or, they just Googled for like the past hour and they still haven't like made any progress to finding the solution, or it becomes more overwhelming, right? Then that's the time to like share what you know and then ask your question. Let people know that this is the context that I have, but I'm just like, I'm still completely lost, right? If you can show developers that you've invested the time, that you put effort into finding the answer, I am telling you, you are going to get a way more helpful developer on the other side majority of the time. You have to learn to Google. So, really simple question. Most common web development backend languages. Hey, look, it popped up. First result. How many times have we gotten this question? All right, so JavaScript, PHP, Python, Java, and Ruby. All looks pretty prevalent. I'm a little surprised they're not listing C#, but I'm not all that surprised, right? So let's talk about we're going to go through some more specific libraries, but front end, I'm just going to make it really easy. In the United States, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React for the framework, typically in most areas. But again, you're going to have to look at the job postings to clarify that information. So now that front end is out of the way, right? HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React. Now we're going to dive into backend, right? Really simple question asked. Most common web development backend languages: JavaScript, PHP, Python, Java, and Ruby. And I have a few other links where we're going to dive into a little bit more specifics around this, because like JavaScript, okay, what does that mean? Is that like front end? Is that back end? Like, is that on Node.js, or is that on front end? So, I mean, I think that can be a little bit misleading, but all these are backend languages. You can look up these specific, like what is PHP? What is Python? What is Java? What is Ruby? You can very quickly learn that these are backend languages, but these are just follow-up Google searches that you have to do, that you have to look up. But we'll dive into some other links. But all right, so here you go. Here's your answer right here. And we're going to validate that based on your local area. I actually have jobs. We're going to look at Chicago. You can look at your closest big city, and that's where I usually recommend that you look. But we're going to go through these jobs. We're going to tally everything up, and we're going to actually figure out if this is actually correct in our area, because that is the second step. And I'll periodically pause. I'll touch base, just make sure I'm not missing any questions in chat. First, we use Angular 1.2 from 2012, I think. What? C# kind of old? Yeah, but I mean, .NET stack. It is a little bit older, but the .NET stack is still fairly prevalent. Front-end engineer here, currently working in a startup. Any extra questions that aren't really related to figuring this out, we'll do like an open Q&A afterwards. Hey, Code Thing. Welcome back. How you doing? All right, so these are very like initial entries with a basic Google search. This is the one that produced a bunch of ads, right? Is this the same link? Okay, we're gonna look at Stack Overflow. They have really cool surveys. I believe they only do it yearly, but they kind of just grab a lot of the technologies that a lot of developers are using, and so it's just a giant survey to get a lay of the land, a feel for what's prevalent. All right, so you could even see how many years of experience people have that are actually answering these surveys. Learning how to code. So, it's not just like extremely like brand new developers that might not be in the most sustainable positions or official positions. Sometimes you kind of get like temporary positions, and you can get like weird titles with entry-level roles and weird responsibilities. So you have people that have been in the industry for a while answering these questions. So we're going to skip a lot of this. Don't care about this. But Developer type. Nope. Nope, we're skipping down. Damn. I lost it. Technology. This is what we wanted. Okay, cool. All right, so JavaScript. So we're going to get a feel for this. So before we do look at jobs, we're going to get a feel for actually what is prevalent. So JavaScript, I think this can be misleading, right? JavaScript's on the front end and the back end. And I think, so we already know if you want to go front end, you're going to have to learn JavaScript. You're going to have to dive deep into it, right? So this doesn't tell us much. What I would look at is Node. How prevalent is Node versus Java versus Python? And I wonder if there were any results where they just kind of voted JavaScript but didn't specify Node. I'd be really interested to see if they could skip that question. But here are your technologies right here. And C# is even at 27%. So here are your technologies. SQL. It's essentially a language to interact with the database, but there are actually positions that specifically you'll just be writing tons of SQL and writing optimized queries. Now, keep in mind, just one other thing. And so this is where it can get a little bit confusing, but Java typically isn't used for web development, right? So this isn't specifically just for web development. I don't think so. Most popular technologies. Yep, that's it. So it's not necessarily web development, but Java, it can be used for web development. It's not super common, but typically Python, Node.js, and C#. All three of those languages are pretty prevalent. PHP, you're going to get older code bases. The language or the jobs usually are going to pay a little bit less, but not always, but majority of the time. And so, and you could also, one thing to keep in mind, I guess I'm just giving extra details. And for you to figure this stuff out, you have to look into these languages. What jobs are, what kind of jobs can I get if I know Python? If I know, right? So Python can actually be linked a little bit more towards data science. It could be a mix between development and data science. And so you learn this stuff by looking it up. So I'm just giving you a little extra insight. So anything else? Node.js, C++, PHP. Oh, also with PHP, you can be a little bit more qualified for WordPress type positions. Again, they're going to be lower paid positions compared to a lot of these other technologies. I don't know about Java, but more specifically Node.js and Python. If you want to look up average salaries of developers working with these languages, you can literally just look up like Python developer, JavaScript developer, Node.js developer. Like there are sometimes positions like that. Sometimes it could take a little bit of digging to figure that out and going to different average salary websites that'll list that kind of information and break it down even by language. But there are tons of surveys out there that'll give you that information. And so now we kind of have an idea of like what we can learn potentially for web development. Now we need to break that down. Okay, what about my local big city? Because things will change based on the big city and based on the type of industry in that larger city can highly influence the stack that you are going to learn based on what you have to build, like the problems that you need to solve in that industry. And that is our next step. Then we're jumping into all of these positions and we're going to tally it up. So I'm going to do 25 positions, right? It's going to take forever if I do like 100 positions. 25 positions. We're going to go through. I highly recommend you do at least 100 positions. That'll give you a better feel for what technologies exist, but we're just going to go to each position, get all the technologies, and I'll kind of show you how to figure out, like, are they just asking if that technology is, it's okay if you know that technology and they're going to teach you another technology, or is that the technology that they're using? Sometimes they're not very clear about that, but as we go through some of these positions, I'll kind of share some insight with that. I just used this method to find a bootcamp that teaches the technologies that are relevant to my area. That's awesome, Chris. I mean, that's exactly what you do. That's exactly what you do. If you're trying to figure out, because the stack in your coding bootcamp matters. It does matter. I don't care what others say. I promise you it 100% does matter. And so before you even choose a coding bootcamp, you want to rule out coding bootcamps based on a lot of marketable stacks, because your whole goal is to get a job, right? You can always move to different languages, different frameworks, but I'm telling you, a lot of companies will prefer you if you already know their stack, if you already know their language at that entry level, especially. So, well, I shouldn't say especially, but it matters. Look it up if you want to choose the right coding bootcamp. One thing I've noticed that in my company, we have separate backend and front end teams, not many full stack profiles. That is another illusion. Amen. A lot of people like try to sell themselves as a full stack developer at the entry level. You're not a full stack developer. I mean, you can call yourself one, sure, but you know, a lot of employers are just going to look at you like, okay, well, what do you really know? Are you better on the front end? Or are you better on the back end? How am I supposed to know this? And if you just constantly sell yourself as a full stack developer, what the hell does that even mean? How do you stand out? Simple answer is you don't. You don't stand out. That's really important to know. The stats change depending on your local area, city too, 100%. That's way, we're definitely going to dive into it. All right, so let's dive in. All right, so it's okay if you see like a position 5 years. I mean, if you can find a position that's like location requirements, company, employer, that's like 3 years and under. Maybe that's a little bit more relevant. We're going to be a bit lazy with this, but 3 years or young or under is usually a position that you can apply to, and you can look for the technologies in that position, but they're not going to change a whole lot depending on the amount of years of experience required, at least from what I've seen. All right, so Azure, so this essentially Microsoft. Where are you? C#. So we're going to list C# here. Actually, I don't usually use numbers. We can type in this one, right? All right, C#. We have one. And then, so the thing is with the first few positions, you're going to be looking at different technologies. You're going to be like, is that a language? Is that a framework? What the hell is that? You're going to have to look this stuff up. This takes time, right? What is Visual Studio? What is C#? What is MVC? You're going to have to look this stuff up. But essentially, like, you can get a good amount of knowledge for like, okay, what are the languages that I'm looking for at this position specifically? So anytime you see like backend languages like that, I don't know, it labels itself as a full stack position. But again, when you do apply for this type of position, you want to figure out if it's more focused on front end or back end, and if that speaks to your skills. Just lean over. So C#, JavaScript framework. So it just says JavaScript frameworks, pretty open to a bunch of different frameworks. Integrates. Okay, cool. So that doesn't really tell us much. If we don't know React, if we don't know any front end technologies, anything like that, we can't put it in there. And I'm going to be lazy. Would I even recommend you do? Because again, this is live stream. I want to try to speed this up, but you can put in like Azure. I mean, you could literally put HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I mean, sometimes it's going to be just HTML and CSS. You're just building landing pages. That's kind of rare. But like even jQuery, right? jQuery, you want to list that down. We're just going to look at backend languages right now, but like list these languages down, libraries and languages and frameworks, and just list them and tally them up. All right, so front end developer. Actually, I actually am going to include jQuery. Cool. One. Going down, and what I would even do is like you could do 25 jobs on the Google Jobs board, and then you could do like LinkedIn Jobs board, Indeed, etc. You could even look at AngelList and break it up between different job boards. Just make sure anywhere. Now you want to skip the anywhere positions. And I did a whole live stream about this, but sometimes they'll post a local position that's not really local and that you're going to have to commute to. You're going to have to look for that in the description as well. Front-end developer, cross-functional team. I get the feeling this is one of those positions. Yeah, there's no information. If there's no information, relevant information, you just move on. Web design developer. The hell is that? Okay, CSS Bootstrap, and you could even do like Bootstrap. One. Creative Suite. Yo, K-Slime, welcome. So this is a little bit more, actually, when you start seeing like design focused stuff, I'm actually going to toss this. A combination of design and front-end development is a little bit rare, and it's usually more focused on design with a little bit of developer chops. I mean, it can go either way, but that's where it starts diluting some of your stats. You want to go for traditional, like official engineering positions, developer positions. That can throw you off. This is senior, that's okay. That's in Chicago. JSON. This doesn't tell me a whole lot. Again, your first like 10 positions are just going to be looking these technologies up to understand what they are, and you might not fully understand. But again, always go back to your primary languages. Technology, go back to your primary languages and just kind of base it off there if you want to skip a lot of the fluff, because this can take time for sure. So I see like no Bootstrap, jQuery, anything like that. No React, right? Framework. Backend, okay. Exchanges with backend frameworks. Experience with Ajax request. So this is probably a, front end position. Doesn't really give you a lot of useful details. We go on. React, Vue, Angular. So here's the thing. When it mentions all three, so your three frameworks, and I think you could probably look down to look at the most popular framework on this survey. If it mentions all three, I wouldn't even put anything. It's a waste of your time, right? It's essentially saying like, just get comfortable with a framework and we'll probably transfer that knowledge over. That's what that's saying. But again, so this is Java, 1, jQuery, 1. You can put Unix, Linux exposure to it. Java, and we go down. That's it. Shouldn't you just learn the most popular in your area? Yes, 100%. This is why we are doing this, Ludwig. You want to figure out what is the most popular in your area. And this is how I would break it down as well. You can look at different surveys. People that try to aggregate that data. I find sometimes you'll find it and sometimes you'll find trustworthy data, not always broken down into specific languages, libraries, and frameworks, though. Usually it's like the type of position. Desktop. We can go through like maybe 10 or 15. Because I want to like go through a lot of this wording and just say like what I would kind of exclude and what I would include. JavaScript, WordPress. This is a WordPress position. You could even put WordPress. Client will implement basic functionality leveraging the WordPress built-in, etc. This feels like a WordPress. Maybe they have just like a WordPress website, and sometimes companies will manage multiple websites, but anytime you see WordPress, you put WordPress. Staff, widgets, PHP, experience developing applications in PHP, Python, Perl. So here's the thing, unless it's agency work, this doesn't give you a lot of information either. You can put this. Actually, like if you stay consistent and you start documenting all of these technologies, like we just saw React, Angular, and Vue, and you just list those off, React, Angular, and Vue, and you tally all of them up, and now you see like a bunch of languages, PHP, Python, Perl, Ruby, Django framework, Rails, .NET, which would be C#. You can, as long as you stay consistent and list all of them off for every single job posting, that's fine. I'm just trying to speed this up, and like generalized posts like this, they're either open to you transferring your knowledge, or they're like agency work where they might work with multiple technologies. Or, I mean, sometimes you will get a company that's so big that they do have multiple stacks that they do work with. Anything? Nope. We're going to move on. Front end developer. So for front end, we're going to be looking specifically for any libraries, like maybe they mention Redux or something like that. Minimum 5 to 8 years. HTML, Git, integrate both. Not a lot of information. If you're getting a lot of job postings, where it doesn't have a lot of information, you might have to add to that 100 jobs Like this can be a long process to see what's marketable in your area. Methods, application. Nope, still not a lot of information. Web developer. Yep, that helps me see that. Thank you. Advanced jQuery. We get 2. We'll go through a few more. And then I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. Junior developer. University, calendar, news, event system, assist with maintenance. Okay. Yo, what happened to the colors? Like, what? I can't even see it. Generally, plan Google careers. Okay. I can't even. Okay, so software engineer, web development, full stack, jQuery, C#, jQuery, C#. React. 1. Including schema design. Postgres. You could mark these off. You could do Postgres. 1. So the thing is, you should have a list. So like you should have a list of the frameworks that exist, the popular frameworks. You should have a list of the libraries that exist. You're probably going to get some of the back end. Well, you'll get some of the back end and the front end, but you should have a list of the databases specifically. So like when we start seeing practical experience with relational databases, such as when you see like such as, that's a little bit less relevant. And I would even argue you're going to mark all of these technologies down that they list, or you're going to put like relational databases or non-relational databases. And so how do you figure out that? Oh, what are relational databases? What types of databases exist, right? And then you can you'll eventually get to the point where you find, oh, non-relational databases exist. And you don't really have to memorize exactly how all of these work, but you could even go down. They have a section for databases with the Stack Overflow survey, MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, MongoDB. They have these listed. So you can look at some of the most popular databases. That's also, if you want to get that list of databases, I'm telling you, this survey is actually really, really good. And especially for aspiring backend developers, you can look at like what platforms are they going to be launching their application and hosting their application on. AWS, one of the most popular ones. You probably heard it many times. Google Cloud Platform is another one. Azure, we've seen that pop up. Heroku. And this is just like extra advice. If you are trying to become a developer, like just initially toss your application or your projects on Heroku. It's one of the easiest things to just get set up with a hosting provider. If it's like PHP, if it's WordPress, something like that, you could just use a shared hosting. Stablehost.com is pretty good. MDD hosting is pretty good. I don't really know the major players of quality, but I do know when I own my web hosting company, Stablehost and MDD hosting were definitely 2 major competitors that provided tons of quality. And then frameworks, again, you can get your list of most popular frameworks. You're going to have to break this up. I'd say jQuery is a little bit more of a library, but sure. React, Angular, Vue, Express for the backend, ASP.NET Core. And essentially they're kind of mixing frameworks and libraries here. But again, this gives you an entire list of things that you potentially can learn. I'm telling you, like people shy away from this. You definitely want to look at this survey. It's really helpful in figuring that out. I started doing, yeah, Christopher, thank you. We're just looking at Chicago because we need a city to look at. Started doing Python, Flash, CSS, and JavaScript. Nice combo, but so unexpected. Yep, a little unexpected. And I would be careful about like off. I mean, I'm telling you, like if you're trying to get a job, don't make it complicated. Just go with a marketable stack. Don't try to like fit in like random technologies that you think sound cool. Like you can expand on those technologies down the road. But I think learning good conventions from a lot of pre-established, very popular, well-maintained frameworks can give you a good structure. And I think that's what a lot of people are lagging when they try to figure out which is the right path for them. So be careful about like mixing a lot of languages that typically aren't going to be super common with that stack, but yeah. Postgres moment. I always see AWS in my area, by far the most popular one, for sure. Yeah, Postgres is, Postgres is popular, but AWS is very popular on the back end. All right, we'll do 3 more. Web developer, just see if we can catch any text that's kind of confusing to read. HTML, CSS, JavaScript without relying on libraries to accomplish innovative interactions. Ooh, so that's going to be like heavy vanilla JavaScript. When I hear that, that's probably not. Wait. Hold on. All right. I didn't think we were going to be calling out companies, but all right. So expert level knowledge and understanding of HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript programming without relying on any libraries to accomplish innovative interactions. Expert in front-end frameworks, specifically Bootstrap 4 and 5. Bootstrap really isn't a framework, and this is going to provide a lot of really interesting interactive tools with JavaScript. I don't know. It kind of feels like this paragraph conflicts with this one. Maybe it's just me. I don't think you know what the fuck you're talking about. So we can poke fun at like silly job postings like this, but sometimes it's like when you get opinion, I don't know, when I hear like, oh, only do vanilla JavaScript, don't bring in any libraries, don't bring any frameworks. And then like they always slip. They'll always bring in something like jQuery or something like that down the road where you're like, what? I thought you guys were pretty hardcore with this. Like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of companies like this contradict themselves. It's just funny. You have to laugh at it. What classifies as expert knowledge generally? I don't know. It's a meaningless word. It's a completely meaningless word. That job description is a no-no. Instant company block. I mean, come on. Yeah, that was kind of bad. I don't know. Okay, so do they give us HubSpot markup language? Okay. Jinja or Python-based language or Python-based. I don't know what this is. I've never heard of it, or Python-based language, but it sounds like when you see this, like a HubSpot, it might be kind of like probably like a low-code solution, and it might have a similar programming style to Python, and that's why they prefer it. So Python, I mean, you could put Python for this, and it can transfer over potentially. Anything else? Okay, in a CMS, so develop, document, test, and deploy web pages in a CMS. So content management system. Essentially, when you see content management system, this isn't really a traditional developer engineering role. Content management system is a little bit different. It's going to be simplified. And I think that's where I see like HubSpot. Oh, yep, HubSpot, WordPress, Drupal. I mean, the fact that they say proficient with HubSpot markup language, that they might have some sort of content management system solution. And I would ask, like, if you don't want to get trapped in a content management system, because you're probably not going to be doing a lot of heavy engineering work or a lot of like deep coding, ask about that. Web and mobile. Okay, that's an interesting combination. How could you even know all of this stuff? So a lot of this stuff that I'm giving you right now, it's extra information, and you don't. And that's kind of the tricky thing. You have to look all of this up. What does this mean? Like, you have to put the time into it. And that's really my argument. It's like, you know, so you can get a list of, databases, but like, if you don't even know what a database is, like, just look up basic articles that'll go through like a general overview of the web developer stack. And it can take it can take time to even figure out, okay, what's the difference between front end? What's the difference between back end, right? And so that's actually a really important thing to note. You aren't going to necessarily come up with the stack that you need right away, because a lot of times as a new developer, you're not going to know what any of these parts really mean. And you have to look up articles. You have to look up YouTube videos. And I'm telling you, people slack off on this. And they let themselves get overwhelmed because they look up a few videos that, like, 2 videos that are contradictory, but a lot of your knowledge will start being solidified with more data. You need more data. And it's just like looking up as much as you possibly can based on where you currently are. So, you know, if you're just starting, you're like, coding, it would be kind of cool if I built a website. Are you going to look up the most popular framework at that time? No, you're not ready to learn that. But you're going to be like, okay, how do I build a website? Or what makes up a website? What technologies makes up a website? And you start from there. You have to break it down as simple as possible. And eventually, like, it's not going to take long for you to get to like, okay, well, what language should I learn, right? What back-end language, what front-end language? But I'm telling you, you got to Google this. You have to start solidifying some of this information. And when you do, sometimes it's going to feel like you still have gaps in your knowledge. You really don't understand, like, you still don't understand the difference between back-end and front-end. And so that's, you know, a lot of good structured courses, a lot of good paid courses are designed to answer that question, right? That's why, you know, you're probably not going to be a self-taught developer that just learns entirely from random articles on the internet. You're going to get a structured course. You're going to get like a structured book that will go through this, an A through Z solution that'll go through all of this and help you like really build that foundation to understand what this is even talking about. But it takes time, it takes research. And I mean, I think a lot of people, and this is the message I'm trying to deliver. A lot of people just want to like rush through all this. It takes time. You have to give yourself time for a lot of these concepts to solidify, but people always want the fastest path to the career transition. And I'm telling you, so many people shoot themselves in the foot and get overwhelmed because they move too quickly through it. It's a good question that you asked, but that's a really good lesson to learn. So slow it down, break it down. If you don't even understand like what React is or what a front end framework is, it's like, then maybe you need to break that down a little bit simpler. Like, what is a front end framework? Why is it even needed, right? Like, what is it built with? And just give yourself time to try to figure this stuff out. Don't rush into it. Yeah, every posting I normally find at least one thing I've never heard of. That can't happen. All right, one more. Application. We'll do application mobile, because when you get into these hybrid positions, web development and mobile, like, this is a little bit confusing. So when you get like, usually, so maybe this is a good knowledge to give. If you want to get into web development, you're probably going to be looking for like these titles: software engineer, software developer, front-end developer, front-end engineer, back-end developer, back-end engineer, right? You can get different things that are a little bit more specific, like WordPress developer, etc. But when you start blending web and mobile, it can get a little bit too confusing. And I don't think that's actually going to give you the information. You start blending front-end and design. We skipped a position like that because it's a little bit confusing. Go for more traditional roles, and like full stack developer is another traditional one. So just go for the titles that I just mentioned. So again, I want to emphasize this because a lot of people miss this. Front-end developer, front-end engineer, back-end developer, back-end engineer, full stack developer, full stack engineer, software engineer, web developer. Those are, if you just look up like those titles alone and look up positions with those titles, that can really help you start solidifying the jobs that you should be gathering some of these technologies from. All right, we're going to do this last one. Java. Break it down, containerize. Again, like a lot of these jobs. And so the reason why I'm just focused on essentially the languages to start, because the libraries are a little less relevant. The languages are what's really important, right? And so to get a list of I just typed in most common web development backend languages. If you just stick with these, right, and look for these in your specific jobs, you can start a lot of this extra information, a lot of this cloud stuff and DevOps stuff, database stuff. It doesn't have to be overwhelming anymore. And then as you learn more about like what makes up the entire stack, then you can go back into this, do the same thing and look at, okay, now, you know, what kind of host am I going to be looking for? What kind of framework am I going to be looking for? What kind of library? So always start with a language, break that down. And if you if you just want to specifically just record all of these technologies, you can do so. You don't have to fully understand it. And then you could start learning what what components kind of pretty much make up the entire stack, and you start learning, okay, well, what does this technology do? What does this technology do? You can learn like, what's a framework? React is a framework. Well, what is it? What exactly is a framework? Like, so you can just look at all these technologies and look at the most prevalent ones and then look up what these pretty much are in Google. So I want to be careful about this because this process can get overwhelming. My big recommendation to you is just focus on the languages, C#, Java, JavaScript, etc. Break that down, put it into a spreadsheet, and start solidifying your knowledge with that. And then what you can do, you don't even have to go back in and look up, okay, now I'm going to do like React for the framework, Postgres for the database, etc. You could just say, okay, what are the most popular libraries and frameworks using C#? What are the most popular libraries and frameworks using Java, right? Now you don't necessarily have to go back into all these job postings. This process, this step in the process that I'm telling you right now, the most important thing that you can do is tally up the languages specifically in your local big city. All this extra information, it's extra information. That's exactly what it is. And if you find it confusing, if you find it overwhelming, you don't have to get it from these job postings. You can get it down the road. The most important thing is to figure out your stack, your language. I would even say stack because stack can include like a framework. So figure out your language specifically. That's it. This is how you solidify it. This takes time. You're going to go through 100 job postings. You can go through more, and you're going to skip some jobs because it doesn't give you information. You're going to go to different job boards, but this is what you have to do. You have to put in the time to figure this out. And a lot of people would just like look up, okay, what's the most popular languages? All right, I'm going to go through a course that teaches me that. And usually you're going to be all right with that. Usually. But if you really want to make sure, you have to rule it out by doing this spreadsheet. That's exactly what you do. That's it. That's how you figure out your stack. And again, give yourself time to really understand your entire stack and like what it means. You don't really have to know how to use the technology, but over time, you're going to have to, when you do front end, a lot of people start with front end, for example, to build like a landing page, and then they build a form. They're like, okay, well, I can submit my form, but like what even happens when I click that submit button, right? Then you have to figure out, oh, okay, it sends a message to the back end. What's the back end? Right? And allow yourself to naturally learn the different pieces of that stack. And eventually you're going to have to get that website hosted. What does that mean, right? So most popular web development hosting solutions. So give yourself time to do this, but this is how you rule it out. Any questions? I feel like it's pretty, I wouldn't say it's necessarily simple, but it is kind of, or it's not easy, but it is pretty straightforward. And I feel like a lot of people get tripped up on this step way too much. And sometimes even, this is advice I give to some people. It's like, you've spent way too much time being indecisive about your stack, right? Sometimes, well, eventually you just have to pick one. And I think another problem is, it's not that usually people have a general idea of like a few stacks they could pick up, but they're just indecisive people. And it's okay if you're a very indecisive person. A lot of people are very indecisive. That's a habit you have to break. And keep in mind, you can change tracks as you go along. If you're learning a certain stack, if you realize it's not for you, or you find a video of like, you find 3 YouTubers that just talk about it, it's like, man, I really like this stack. Like, I wish I would have learned something else. All these positions are underpaid. I wish I would have known that. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I want to get paid for what I'm worth, so I need to learn the technology to like bump up my worth, and I want to make more money. And then eventually you might be able to switch stacks down the road, but this isn't like the super linear path of you're going to figure all this out. A lot of things start blending together, but as they start blending together and you learn more and more about like the different options that you have, at first it can be overwhelming, but you're going to find that a lot of your knowledge can start solidifying once you start seeing the same technologies come up over and over and over. And now you see a tutorial that implements this technology. You're like, oh, okay. So this is how this technology is implemented. Now I didn't even know what like a database was. Now I kind of understand the use case of Postgres. I've seen this on all these job postings. Now I see this implemented I'm far enough into it where I know the fundamentals, where I can kind of understand what's going on in this tutorial. So it's not like this perfect linear path, but a lot of things will be solidified as you go, and it's okay to change a stack down the road. But, again, that's going to extend the amount of time that it takes to learn it. I don't know. That's my advice with it. Hopefully that was helpful and that was not confusing, because I know that like just learning these technologies and what stacks you should learn can be a little bit overwhelming and confusing, but it doesn't have to be. This is exactly how I'd break it down, and this is how you should do it before you even sign up for a coding bootcamp as well. Now, the good thing is with coding bootcamps, when you go to a local area, and that coding bootcamp is in the local area, usually they're teaching a stack that's prevalent in that area. Not always. We get Ruby shops with coding bootcamps that usually if a coding bootcamp is teaching Ruby, they just don't want to switch over their curriculum, or they find that Ruby is an easier first programming language to learn initially, which is also true. It can teach you some pretty good habits and conventions. But overall, like if you want to even try to, like if you find even this process overwhelming, look at like in New York City, look at 5 coding bootcamps in New York City. What stack are they teaching? What technologies are they teaching? You could even tally it up based on that and use essentially the work that coding bootcamps have done, the research that they've done to solidify that stack for you. That's also another option. It's not always super accurate, but it can be another option if this process is overwhelming. That's it. That's all I had to say today. So we're going to go into an open Q&A, and we could even open it up past this. I don't care. If you have any questions, anything like that regarding web development, any blockers, feel free to let me know in chat. Why do languages call things differently, like array in JavaScript, but call list in Python? You're going to get different ecosystems of developers. You're going to get different creators that have preferences, that have built those initial conventions. You got to realize these stacks and languages have been built at different times sometimes, and whatever was popular at that time and whatever definitions existed at that time that was most commonly accepted among developers, that a lot of things can influence that. A job was asking for a rock star developer, and I don't even know how to play the guitar, or even in a band. I'll never get a job. You never played Guitar Hero? Am I dating myself? Or outdating? What's the phrase? Like, I think dating is. It just sounds weird when I say it. You guys know what Guitar Hero is, right? Like, everyone in this chat knows what Guitar Hero is. Please say you do. I know I'm in my early 30s, but like, I'm not that old, right? It would be interesting to see what the employer dashboard on Indeed looks like. I think they just click on checkboxes on what they're looking for, and Indeed smashes everything together. That sounds pretty accurate. It would be interesting. Yeah, it just keeps getting more and more competitive these days. It does. Good stuff. Glad it helped. Do you still code often? I do. I try to every single day. For a while, I was going on and off while I was trying to build up my content and doing a lot of coaching. But now I do it almost every single night. I usually get about an hour in every single night on the weekdays. And then on the weekends, I can get a little bit more. I can spend about like 2 hours on a Saturday. Sunday, I don't know. I got to stop. I do code sometimes on Sunday, but I can't just sit there and do nothing. So if I don't have something going on a Sunday, I'll start working again, which is a really bad habit, and I have to stop it. But I can kind of justify coding because it's not like towards my business, and it's just for fun. I don't know. I need to give myself more breaks. But yeah, I try to at least an hour a day. Question about the job search after a coding bootcamp. Should I work on a portfolio, website, or a CRUD application as my next side project? See on Reddit that portfolio sites aren't as important. It depends on like how many projects you've built. Your resume can showcase your projects, right? If you have several complex projects, put that on the resume. A portfolio is always going to be a bonus, but like usually, it just depends on the type of project that you're going to build. But the most important thing that you want to do is solidify and reinforce everything that you just learned with the coding bootcamp. I would argue a portfolio is actually a really important piece, but a portfolio shouldn't take a whole long time to build after a coding bootcamp, right? You don't even need to bring in a framework. It just needs to be a static page, to be honest with you. And I think people overcomplicate their portfolio. I would even argue with your portfolio, maybe you should consider just tossing up a WordPress site. If you have like a blog or something like that, that can be very powerful. Your portfolio is the least interesting project that you're going to showcase to employers, but you also want to do a good job at showcasing your projects and delivering the information that the employers actually care about. Through the fire and flames. All right, so you guys, okay, Guitar Hero I played when I was younger. All right, so some people do know Guitar Hero. Sure, okay, you're just humoring me. Guitar Hero was a lot of fun. Black Magic Woman was my favorite song on there. I actually don't even remember that song. Black Magic Woman. I don't remember that song. Man, it has been a long time. But I'm glad to hear some of you have at least played Guitar Hero. It was such a good game back in the day. My first contribution to this chat was to answer whether I know Guitar Hero. Hey, that's fine. Okay, the number of people that say dumb shit in my live chat for their first message, like, I should start tallying that up. That's in the dozens in like the last few months, right? If your first message was to just acknowledge that you played Guitar Hero, you are above dozens of other people that typed their very first message in my live chat, so you are completely fine. Do you think having research experience in method development using Python, not related at all to web development, might help getting a coding job? What's method development? Define what research coding is a little bit more. If bigger cities have more jobs, won't they also have much more competition? Yep. 100%. I would argue, I mean, smaller areas, like this is where you can like really stand out a bit more, is like, don't go to a metropolitan, go to like a smaller, larger city. And the competition is definitely going to be less there. I think the competition you're going to have in a metropolitan, the skill level is going to be pretty high. I would argue you probably will have several people, like if you get like just a smaller city, even a small town, if you get a web development job that pops up in that, you'll probably get a lot of applications at that job, but the skill level is probably going to be lower. And I feel like a lot of people can stand out at places like that. So yeah, it all depends on the position. And sometimes you'll get companies that won't even promote their position, right? And sometimes they'll just promote their position through a recruiter because the recruiter has done a good job at placing individuals where, it's really worked out for that company and they just stick with the recruiter. So they don't have to deal with all the time investment it takes to go through like 500 to 1,000 applications for one position. Welcome to the meritocracy. What do you mean? Mostly implementing equations using numerical mathematics. Probably not. It can be a little bit more relevant, maybe a back-end focused position, a position that's managing a lot of big data. I think that might be able to carry over. I mean, I'm not going to say your math skills aren't going to be relevant, but I would say it would depend on the position of how relevant that will be. And if you're going to be dealing, like a lot of times you can get positions that really care about that in the financial sector, even if it is potentially a front-end position, where that's going to be a little bit more relevant. It just depends. So yeah, I mean, definitely list it, but I would argue it's going to be like 1 or 2 bullet points, and you're still going to be highlighting your actual coding projects and what you can do based on that. It's a good question. Everyone should be thinking about like what skills should carry over. And sometimes a lot of like your industry that you come from, even if you don't have a tech job per se, like let's say you were in healthcare, like one of my first companies was a healthcare company, and I became a developer at that company. And I feel like a big part of even getting noticed with that position was me, like, essentially, like, I was Red Cross certified in a lot of stuff, and I was a lifeguard for a long time, and I was an aquatics director, and I would train a lot of my staff with essentially just Red Cross certifications. And I would even have healthcare providers that would come in, and I would train them, and I'd give them the certificate. They'd give it to their hospital, and they could essentially check a box that they could do it. And so that kind of stuff, like, because I was technically in the healthcare industry, or helped healthcare professionals, that kind of stuff will give you a leg up when you do apply for developer positions in the healthcare industry. And you should start thinking about, like, okay, what is my old industry? Were you a waiter or waitress? I mean, you're in the service industry. Don't you think, like, those service industries have websites, right? Like, think about how many restaurants exist and how many websites exist for those restaurants. Think about, like, chains that would hire developers to, like, manage those kind of websites. You being in the service industry and really understanding your user specifically can really help you stand out among people that have never been in the service industry before. Utilize that. Utilize your old industry. I am telling you, it's your superpower when it comes to you standing out as an entry-level developer. That will carry over. Don't shy away from it. I'm starting boot camp at Springboard in 2 weeks. The intro test was pretty easy, but I'm still excited that I got in. That's awesome, Chris. Good luck with the program. You are welcome for that perspective. That's it. That's all I had. This process, hopefully, was helpful. Even as I started talking about it in these different languages, I think you guys brought up really good questions. Well, how are we supposed to know all this? And it takes a lot of looking up. So highly recommend you start with the Stack Overflow survey, the most recent one they did, 2021, I believe. And so look at these technologies and just try to match them up with, like, okay, out of these technologies, what are these jobs talking about, and tally it up. This can take a long time. And if it starts getting overwhelming, just focus on the position. And then with that position, look up, what you still are, like, what are the most popular frameworks and libraries within that stack of C#, of Java, of JavaScript, of Python, etc. And narrow it down to web development if you want to focus on web development. That's another gotcha, is, like, sometimes you're going to be told to learn certain libraries with Python, but the author is a little bit more focused on preparing people for data science specifically. And you want to also narrow that down. It takes some time, but tally it up. The best thing that you can do is use as much data as possible to get, essentially what you should be learning. This is important. Don't skip this step. And if you are going to skip this step, cheat and see what the local coding boot camps have decided on. It's not going to be the most accurate necessarily, but it might be a little bit of a quick solution to this. But that's all I had. Hopefully this helps. And we will be live Friday, 1:30 Central Time. And where it's a little bit more of an open-ended Q&A. Also, again, always appreciate people that support me on Patreon, Twitch, and YouTube. Thank you so much for the support. It goes directly towards bills. If you do like my content, please consider supporting. It's just $5 a month. We actually have a live Q&A every month. It's more private. And so we all hop on video, on Discord, and we kind of just chat. I'll answer questions. But yeah, do appreciate anyone that does support me. So thank you. I will see you guys next time, Friday, 1:30 Central Time. Bring your questions, bring your blockers. I will see you then. Happy coding, everyone. Take care.